Hello and welcome back to the One Shot Show, where GMs go to level up, and we're pounding through the guests again. Today we have Pat from Fury of the Small. My name is Matt, that there is Mock, and we've brought Pat in specifically to the studio because we are talking this episode about something called concept campaigns. Now, Pat, the game that you run, Fury of the Small, we'll get into this in a little bit, is a very conceptually dense campaign. But first, what do we mean when we say concept campaign?
What do we mean, Matt?
Well, Mock, I'll answer that question for you. So when
Should we get Pat to talk about this? Is it a waste to have a guest on and then define the whole episode ourselves?
He looks handsome. We can just roll the camera on it for the paid subscribers only. Easy.
Yes, go to Patreon and see the video.
Exactly. It's just, three guys in a studio and only one of them looks good. Sorry, Mark. Concept campaigns. We're talking about concept campaigns. So a concept campaign at a very fundamental level is you as a GM, you've put together a campaign that's got a particular gimmick, right? So maybe that's Oops, all bards. Everyone's going to play a bard. We're going to do a traveling troupe kind of thing. Maybe it's, everyone's going to play dwarves, and then this one idiot shows up session one with a hobbit. Or it could be, hey, we're going to do a heist. It's going to be 3 sessions and it's just the heist, right? But it's coming in with a specific idea that is going to be executed on. And obviously that, on a very fundamental level, changes how you plan, how you run, and how the players play. So, Pat, you've just taken a sip of your drink. Swallow it quickly. So talk to us about Fury of the Small and the various concepts that drive that campaign that are unique to it.
This is an excellent chance for you to also plug your own show.
I love
if you felt like it.
I mean, Heart and Soul is in it so far. And it's based off that very idea that you've just said. Many years ago, I was reading Lost Minds of Phandelver, and I was kicking around I campaign ideas in my head. That's before I DM'd anything, and the idea of doing basically the goblin side on the other side of Lost Minds of Phandelver First Adventure was where it sort of came from, and going the idea of a revenge story arc, as you said, the way of a heist arc, but placed on top of a D&D game. And then the flip that then came in later on when it was pitched to me by the Mates of the Wild Magic Tavern, which is the umbrella that we made Fury of the Small under, when they pitched it to me and going we're doing it with this tight cast, we're thinking 4 people, and then I was what if the 4 players played the characters playing the Lost Minds of Phandelver First Adventure in the first episode, and then you flip it, and then they play 4 surviving goblins for the remainder of the campaign. So,
spoilers for episode 1 of Fury of the
Small. I mean, we get in there. It was.
By the way, even though all of the concept art and all of the promotional material had featured goblins heavily, in fact exclusively, when it kicked off, I didn't know this going into it. Right when I listened to the first episode, it kicks off and it's it's a couple of regular characters. There's an old wacky wizard and so on and so on, and they're raiding a little group of goblins. I still, all the way up till the halfway point where the reverse comes in, the sort of reveal that actually they're playing these survivors who find their home in ruins, and it floored me. It took me by surprise, genuinely, which was a really cool moment, in spite of the fact that all of the promotional material had goblins in it.
Yeah, we were kind of we toyed on that for a while because we didn't know how we wanted the show. Because again, concept campaign, how do you present it in such a way? The players all knew entirely those parameters. They knew that they were having to make classic feeling characters who would go into we called them 2014 D&D style characters. It's make your 2014 first D&D character. They can be as problematic as you want them to be.
This is old Sildenafil the Wizard.
Absolutely, yeah. And then know that then you're going to flip into Goblin, and then over the course of the adventure, we're going to re-encounter your heroes, and we're going to build them off one by one. Over a course of years and years and years.
You brought up something really, really interesting there, which is
it something that we've talked about before, or is this a fresh concept?
No, this is absolutely something we've talked about before. It is player buy-in, and it is you talking about talking to your players.
Player buy-in
about we're going to make generic fantasy heroes, and then I'm going to have you come pre-prepared with these goblins and explaining the whole concept before they even sit down at the table. I think it's really important with games that are defying conventions or are switching genre or doing a rug pull, like completely switching the viewpoint like Fury of the Small does.
Yeah.
Can you talk about like how in-depth those conversations with your players were? Were they feeding into you about the genre of the show and how it would feel as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So like the first session 0 that we had kind of had this whole other part to it, which was around us resourcing the idea of the revenge story. So like we all came prepared with like which ones we were familiar with, which ones we really enjoyed, the beats and conventions we really liked from them, and then the archetypal characters that we saw in them. And so that ended up feeding heavily into my prep. Like the final, without giving away spoilers too much, the big thing that came away from that meeting for me was like, man, I've got the final chapter of the campaign. Was one of the players, I think it was Tom, saying like, my favorite segment in any revenge story is when they arrive at like the character who's like redeemed themselves, who is living in a tiny little monastery or cabin out in the woods, who has really put their life of violence behind them, and then the avenging characters show up on their doorstep. And I was like, man, what an incredible chapter of a campaign. But beyond that, they knew that they would re-encounter their heroes, but they also knew that like because of the time passing mechanic, it's like when you re-encounter your hero who is now a villain, they will be in a completely different world or setting, or they've changed in some interesting way. And then to pair that with the goblins as well. So when the goblins thematics were made, we made the heroes thematics as well, so that the goblin would always complement the hero, which was so much fun, and they were so down for that stuff.
This is so much more different than a regular game of D&D. To use that specific system, for example, I would expect you can show the magic user, you go on an epic quest, and you just beat up a bad guy. And particularly when you are defying those conventions or doing a really high concept campaign, what you're describing there is the most collaborative world building that any GM would ever use. That is so much back and forth from your players, when usually this is a very solo experience, writing and building a world.
Yeah, and there's actually a particular detail that I really enjoyed in there as well. In you know how you were describing that collaborative process, I think something that was really cool is that there was still this space that was left to you. It was, hey, we discussed what we like, things we enjoy, things we think are cool, because we sort of do that to some extent in our session zeros already. When we, we're sort of like, do people like heists? Do people like social intrigue? You're doing it on a much more advanced layer, going really in depth into like media and tropes and like narrative catharsis that people particularly get a kick out of. But your players still, by the sounds of it, they still left it to you and went, right, now you take that and design what that end is going to be, and then we're along for that ride. So it's still also a surprise to the characters.
And it was such a surprise to me, because every time they re-encountered a character they were going to take vengeance on, they had to make the choices that you see the protag in Kill Bill make, except they now need to commit to that as their characters. And the way that they did and didn't commit to that was extraordinary. Like there's one encounter in particular, I think it's the third hero, where one of the players, their character is so cut up about what they are going to do and who they need to keep safe, that almost every round of initiative is this incredible round of indecision. But because of the story structure, it actually plays. I was so impressed with that player, because they were playing a warlock and they could have just slung eldritch blasts and let that be the case, but they were like, no, I'm too really playing the genre in a way that, considering we only had 4 rounds of initiative for the 4 heroes and the 4 villains, it was pretty crazy to really watch players enjoy committing to that trope in ways that I would never have envisioned.
That's a really interesting thing there, right? It's so different watching it on a screen when it's Uma Thurman's character making the decision. It's very different when it's you making the decision. So I want to pull the lens away a little bit from your. Let me try that again. Fury of the Small in particular, and talk about concept campaigns as a whole that you maybe want to run in your home games. You know, in the intro, I sort of talked about the oops all bards. You know, we'll play a traveling troupe. Look, there's the everyone is goblins thing. That's always a classic. There's, or if not goblins specifically, sometimes hey, let's all play, anti-heroes with the wackier races. You know, we've got Fallen Aasimar and all that.
Have you ever run a really high-concept, genre-defying wacky campaign yourself you want to talk about?
You know, now that I think about it, and I don't know if I've mentioned this before, so there's this particular style of campaign, and I've run this before, that I sort of based loosely on the Odyssey. It's this quite niche in
We
the
can take a break
publication.
now, Pat. It's going to be the rest of the episode.
I mean, I've always wondered about that. Keep going. I've always had the Odyssey as like a spine I want to use.
Great. Well, you're in the right place. So what this was for, it was actually for a paid thing, and it was meant to be 10 sessions long. That was what the players were paying for. It was this preset thing. So I basically went, right, I've got to do 10 sessions no matter what actually happens. And I got to lay up in advance what it was going to be. Players picked whose session they wanted to, whose short campaign they wanted to join. Mock, you also ran one of these. You were one of the other
I
options.
ran an Oops All Goblins campaign.
Exactly.
Outstanding.
And that's the 10-session format was great for going, well, a concept, can fit within exactly 10 sessions, and it's probably better because there's a little bit more uniqueness. Just saying, hey, it's going to be 10 sessions of D&D. That's not very catchy, but hey, it's going to be 10 sessions of Oops All Goblins. Or in my case, it's going to be 10 sessions. You are going to be on this derelict ship that is trying to get back to safe harbor so that you can return home from this remote location. That was the campaign. That was what I laid up in front of the players. And what I ran was the Odyssey, which, as we've talked about before, is just one fucking thing after another. So if you read the Odyssey, there's the sirens and there's the Cyclops and there's all these individual things that Odysseus deals with. And then when he's dealt with all of them, he gets home. Now, that book could have had 20 more things if it wanted, but for a 10-session campaign, it was perfect because I designed about 10 things. And then what happened in practice was a few of those things took more than one session to resolve. So by the end of it, we got through 7 fucking things after another.
I've got a question about this. So
I've got
Fury
an answer about this.
Fury of the Small is specifically inspired by Lost Mines of Phandelver, and D&D 5e is the system you would use to run that, even though it is defying the genres and expectations of that system. Did you find that D&D 5e supported an Odyssey-style system? Would you use a different system for that in future?
There certainly are systems that could maybe lend themselves better towards it, but at the end of the day, you could probably use just about any major RPG system that doesn't have any inherent narrative gimmicks because it was a narrative gimmick, fundamentally. It's not like I was trying to run a world with no magic, in which case, go play a system with no magic. Unless the point is, the concept is, the world has no magic and you're all wizards on the run.
And so you also had that player buy-in for, we're going to play the Odyssey, here we go. Because one of my favorite little campaigns that I've ever played in was a very high concept campaign where the way it worked was that everybody showed up to this guy's house. He made us stat ourselves for what we thought our real life D&D stats would be. Not even checking, just like taking it. And isekai'd ourselves into Lost Mines of Phandelver.
That's amazing.
That's good.
Now, the twist was that
similar in
Mark
concept.
Zuckerberg was a character, and all of us were in the metaverse in virtual reality, and I could only play the first session. I had to leave.
It doesn't get
and
more high concept than that.
The DM comes to me and says, what we're going to do, because you'd only make this first session, we're going to set the stakes, is you are going to die. Real life. Real life, if you're watching Patreon, you can see me doing little quotation marks. Real life, you're going to get sucked into like the metaverse, and your consciousness is going to be absorbed into the world, and the players are going to go off track and follow the main story.
Outstanding.
And so I did that, and I didn't tell the players that I'd arranged with the DM ahead of time to die like that. And that was an example of what you're talking about collaborative storytelling with your players ahead of time. And as the campaign went on, I wasn't personally involved, but occasionally I'd drop into the messenger group chat and be like, my consciousness is still in here. Please help me. And then he would feed me some little things to say to them. And that was a high concept campaign that also, again, used Lost Mines of Phandelver, used the same system you were using, took it in a wildly different genre-defying convention. And I think that worked really well.
I think there's an interesting thing that we're sort of skirting on the edges here as well when we talk about genre, and we've also talked about different systems. When you're looking at maybe running a concept campaign, I think it is worth considering whether what you're wanting to do is a concept campaign because it is defying the genre of the system that you are running, and in which case it is on purpose, or whether you just want to run a certain genre. Like if you're like, oh, here's my concept. It's D&D, but it's this particular setting.
It's in space.
Yeah,
and there's these ships. We'll call them spelljammers. They just move through.
See, now that's a funny one, but because I actually think that's an interesting thing. But if you would basically bent and molded, D&D 5th edition to the point where it looked and felt like Cyberpunk, you maybe ought to play Cyberpunk.
You should just play Cyberpunk.
Unless you're doing something that can't be done in Cyberpunk and only works in D&D. That was the thing I talked about with the magic, right? Is if you're going to have a setting with no magic, decide straight away whether what you want is a system with no magic or whether you are going to tell a story that utilizes the fact that the setting has no magic. Because if it's the former, go play a system without magic. If it's the latter, then yes, you are running a concept campaign.
I would say on the side of like a content producer producing the thing, the joy that I find with 5e at this point in its life cycle is that it's a little bit like my team of improvisers know the game so well that we can tell a story on top of the game that is many times more sophisticated than if we try and do something whole cloth. I've been trying to do this at the moment in my home game. We flipped over to a system called Fabula Ultima, which is by Need Games, who are our Italian company. Fantastic system. It's designed to emulate the JRPG combat system, and it has this incredibly fun storytelling technique on top. But we've all been kicked in the teeth because we went like, man, we were so good at telling stories in 5e and in 5e Initiative and with 5e classes and characters, but we feel clumsy telling stories now inside this new system that we're loving to play, but it's humbling to go back and go like, okay, now we want to tell the same sort of stories we were telling before, but we need to learn the system before we can do that.
I think we could make maybe a whole episode about just that exact topic. And I think that's also completely different to potentially what we're talking about at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah. This has been, I would say, this topic has been an odyssey. Thank you so much for joining us, Pat.
One fucking thing after another.
One fucking thing after another. That's like how I'd like to think of our podcast episodes in themselves, actually.
Your podcast episodes are beautiful. Like, I love this podcast. I love the way that you're framing it and pitching it. I love the way that you're like opening up to this gaming community here in New Zealand. It's a real pleasure, you guys. Thank you so much.
And I love the fact that you just said that while we're still recording, instead of complimenting yourself.
I know that I had to get it in under the 17-minute mark, if at all.
Go and watch Fury of the Small.
Yeah, go and watch Fury of the Small. It's absolutely fantastic.
Thanks
Pat,
so
it's
much,
been
team.
fantastic to have you on to talk about it and concept campaigns as a whole topic. Thank you very much for tuning in. This has been the One Shot Show, and we'll see you in the next one. If you like what you just heard, feel free to support us on Patreon. Every little bit helps. Go to patreon.com/OneShotShow.